The first time I saw a human kill something with nothing but his bare hands and pure, concentrated spite, I thought my optical sensors were malfunctioning. My name is Krix-Val, and I've been documenting interspecies warfare for the Galactic Council for 300 cycles. I have seen the acid-spitting Torrax melt through titanium plating. I have watched the Vorthan collective consciousness coordinate attacks across 17 star systems simultaneously. Hell, I once observed a single Nexri warrior take down an entire battalion using nothing but electromagnetic pulses and what can only be described as cosmic-level anger management issues. But humans? Humans were supposed to be the galaxy's comic relief. That was before Omega Station. The distress beacon reached our monitoring post at 0347 Standard Galactic Time. Omega Station, a remote mining facility on the edge of Helix Sector, had gone dark. Complete communications blackout. No life signs. No tematid responses. Just silence. The Torrax High Command dispatched their finest strike team. 12 elite warriors, each standing 9 feet tall, armed with plasma cannons that could vaporize a small moon. Their mission was simple: secure the station, eliminate any threats, claim the valuable metamorphic crystals hidden in the asteroid's core. I tagged along as an observer, floating in my environmental suit about a click away from the action. Standard procedure for documenting what we assumed would be another routine Torrax victory. The station looked dead from the outside. No lights, no movement, just a hollow metal shell spinning slowly against the star field. The Torrax team approached with typical arrogance, their leader Gorthai broadcasting on all frequencies about how they would cleanse this pathetic human nest. They docked with the main airlock. 17 minutes later, their screaming started. Not the dignified battle cries of warriors facing a worthy opponent. This was pure primal terror, the kind of sound that makes your species' equivalent of spine-chilling fear response kick in, regardless of how many legs, tentacles, or appendages you happen to possess. The screaming lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Then silence that I waited another hour before moving closer to investigate. My curiosity outweighed my survival instincts, which in retrospect was probably the stupidest decision I'd made since volunteering for this assignment. The airlock was still sealed, but the station's emergency lighting had somehow come back online. Faint red illumination leaked through the transparent aluminum windows, casting eerie shadows across the docking bay. I attached my portable scanner to the hull and ran a quick life sign sweep. The results made no sense. 12 Torrax biosignatures. Flatline. 1 human biosignature. Very much alive, and moving through the station with the casual confidence of someone taking an evening stroll through their own backyard. 1 human. Against 12 Torrax elite warriors, that I had to see this. Using my suit's stealth capabilities, I managed to slip through a maintenance hatch and into the station's lower levels. The corridors were dark except for those pulsing red emergency lights, and the air recycling system was working overtime to clear what smelled like a combination of ozone, blood, and something that reminded me disturbingly of barbecued Torrax. The first body I found was wedged into a ventilation shaft. Gorthai, the strike team leader, his massive frame somehow folded in half and stuffed into a space that should have been physically impossible for him to fit through. His plasma cannon was missing, and there were human handprints burned into his armor plating. Not printed. Burned, as if someone had grabbed him with hands hot enough to melt metal. The second body was in the main corridor, hanging upside down from a light fixture. The third had been used to redecorate the walls in a pattern that would have made abstract artists weep with either joy or horror, depending on their artistic sensibilities. That I followed the trail of destruction through 3 more levels, each scene more impossible than the last. Torrax warriors don't just die easily. Their exoskeletons can withstand direct hits from heavy artillery. Their reflexes are faster than most species' thought processes. They are trained from hatching to be perfect killing machines. And yet here they were, systematically dismantled by what appeared to be a single human with no visible weapons and an apparent complete disregard for the laws of physics. That I found him in the station's command center. He was sitting in the captain's chair, feet propped up on the control console, wearing what looked like a standard-issue human military uniform in black. No rank insignia. No identificación pachis. Just solid black fabric that seemed to absorb the emergency lighting. He was reading a book, an actual, physical book made of processed plant matter and primitive binding materials. While surrounded by the corpses of 12 elite alien warriors, this human was catching up on his recreational reading. He looked up when I entered, and I got my first clear look at his face. Mid-30s in human years, with the kind of calm expression that suggested he just finished a mildly interesting crossword puzzle rather than single-handedly slaughtering an entire strike team. "You must be the observer," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't identify. "Krix-Val, right? Galactic Council Documentation Division." I hadn't transmitted my identity. My suit's stealth systems were supposed to make me invisible to all known sensor arrays. And yet this human knew exactly who I was and why I was there. "How did you? Your reputation precedes you," he interrupted, closing his book and setting it aside. 300 cycles of combat documentation. You've got the best battlefield analysis records in the Outer Rim. I have actually read several of your reports. This was not how I'd expected this conversation to go. "You read my reports." "Professional interest," he said, standing up and stretching like he'd been sitting too long. "You have got a talent for capturing the essential brutality of interspecies conflict. Very thorough, very objective, though I think you might have missed a few details in your assessment of human combat capabilities." I looked around at the carnage surrounding us. "I'm beginning to see that." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made me suddenly understand why prey animals across the galaxy had evolved such strong flight responses. "The Torrax made the same mistake everyone makes," he said, walking over to examine one of the bodies. "They assumed that because humans are small and soft and relatively fragile, we must be easy targets. They forgot to account for the one thing that makes us truly dangerous, which is we don't fight fair." He gestured toward the nearest Torrax corpse. "Gorthai here?" He was expecting a traditional combat engagement. Plasma weapons at medium range, tactical positioning, honor-bound warrior-to-warrior combat. Instead, I turned off the station's gravity generators, flooded the corridors with industrial lubricant, and introduced him to the concept of three-dimensional close-quarters combat in a frictionless environment. I stared at him. "You what? Physics is a beautiful thing," he said, clearly enjoying my confusion. "When you remove gravity and friction from the equation, a 9-foot-tall warrior becomes a 9-foot-tall projectile, and projectiles follow predictable trajectories." He pointed to another body. "Vex Talon tried to corner me in the mining section. He brought a plasma cannon to a power tools fight. Have you ever seen what happens when you reverse the polarity on an industrial plasma cutter? It's educational." The human walked over to the main console and began entering commands. The station's lights came back to full power, and I could see the complete extent of the destruction. It was somehow even worse in proper lighting. "Who are you?" I asked. "Name's Marcus Kane," he said without looking up from the console. "Human Defense Corps, Special Operations Division. Officially, I don't exist. Unofficially, I'm the guy they send when they need something handled quietly and efficiently. Special Operations. Think of us as problem solvers," Kane said. "When the galaxy decides that humanity needs to be taught a lesson, when some species gets the bright idea that humans are weak and defensible when diplomatic solutions aren't working out." He shrugged. "They send us." The implications of what he was saying hit me like a meteor impact. "How many of you are there?" "Classified," he said, but his smile suggested the number was higher than anyone in the Galactic Council suspected. "Let's just say that every major species in the galaxy has at least one human shadow keeping an eye on things." He finished whatever he was doing with the console and turned back to me. "The Torrax High Command is going to be very upset when they find out what happened here. They will probably blame equipment failure or some kind of station malfunction. It's easier than admitting that their elite strike team was taken apart by a single human with access to maintenance manuals and a basic understanding of applied physics. You were just going to let them think that." "Of course," Kane said. "The best victories are the ones your enemies never realize they have lost. Let them keep thinking humans are harmless. Let them keep underestimating us. It makes our job so much easier." He picked up his book and tucked it into a pocket of his uniform. "What were you reading?" I asked, morbid curiosity getting the better of me. "Art of War," he said. "Ancient human military philosophy. There's a passage I particularly like. All warfare is based on deception." The author understood something that most species never figure out, which is, the strongest weapon isn't the one that could destroy your enemy, Kane said, heading toward the exit. It's the one they never see coming. As we walked through the corridors filled with impossible carnage, I realized I was documenting something that would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed humanity. These weren't the bumbling, peaceful explorers that most species assumed they were dealing with. These were apex predators who had learned to disguise themselves as prey. "One more question," I said as we reached the docking bay. "How did you know I was here?" Kane paused at the airlock and looked back at me with that unsettling smile. "We always know who's watching," he said. "We have been keeping track of you for years, Krix-Val. Your reports are required reading for all Human Defense Corps operatives. We need to understand how the galaxy sees us, and you have been providing us with invaluable intelligence without even realizing it." The airlock hissed open, and Kane stepped through to his ship, a sleek black vessel that I somehow hadn't noticed during my approach to the station. "Give my regards to the Galactic Council," he called back. "Tell them the humans send their appreciation for the continued peaceful relations." His ship detached from the station and disappeared into hyperspace before I could form a coherent response. I floated there in the silence for another hour, trying to process what I had witnessed. Everything I thought I knew about human capabilities, about their role in galactic politics, about their apparent weakness and need for protection, had been systematically destroyed along with those Torrax warriors. Humanity wasn't the galaxy's comic relief. They were the punchline to a joke that nobody else was in on, and they had been playing this game for a very, very long time. 3 weeks after the Omega Station incident, I was sitting in my quarters aboard the Galactic Council monitoring vessel, staring at a report that made absolutely no sense. The Torrax High Command had officially declared the loss of their strike team a catastrophic equipment failure. No mention of human involvement. No investigation requested. They'd simply written off 12 of their best warriors as an unfortunate accident and moved on. But that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was the 17 other similar incidents I'd uncovered in the past 72 hours. Nexury patrol ships disappearing near human colonies. Vorthan collective nodes experiencing mysterious system failures whenever they approached Earth-controlled territories. Hegemony battle cruisers suffering inexplicable reactor malfunctions during what should have been routine intimidation missions. Every single incident had the same pattern. Overwhelming alien force encounters humans. Alien force mysteriously ceases to exist. Official reports blame equipment failure or natural phenomena. That I was beginning to suspect that Marcus Kane wasn't as unique as I'd initially thought. And why contemplation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Galactic Council headquarters. Priority 1 transmission, which meant someone very important was very unhappy about something. The holographic image of Council Chair Thek Mori materialized in my quarters. All 4 of her optical sensors focused on me with bureaucratic intensity. "Observer Krix-Val," she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that could make entire star systems reconsider their political affiliations. "We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The kind that requires immediate investigation and absolute discretion," Thek Mori replied. 3 days ago, the Hegemony War Fleet Crimson Talon, consisting of 47 vessels and over 12,000 crew members, vanished while conducting a routine patrol near the Proxima system. I felt my environmental suit's temperature regulators kick in as my core temperature spiked. The Hegemony were the galaxy's premier military force. Losing a single ship was newsworthy. Losing an entire fleet was the kind of event that started interstellar wars. Vanished how? No distress signals. No debris field. No trace of their passage. They were there one moment, gone the next. Thek Mori's optical sensors narrowed. The last transmission we received from Fleet Commander Zek Nor was unusual. Unusual how? See for yourself. The hologram shifted, and suddenly I was listening to the bridge recording from the Hegemony flagship. Static filled the audio channel. then cleared to reveal the unmistakable sound of Zeknor's voice, tight with barely controlled panic. "This is Fleet Commander Zeknor to all hegemony vessels. We have encountered. I'm not sure what to call this. There's a single human ship, small civilian transport. They are requesting permission to come aboard." Another voice, presumably his tactical officer. "Sir, they are not armed. Standard human diplomatic vessel. Should we vaporize them?" "Negative. We will bring them aboard. Might be useful to have human prisoners when we begin the Proxima conquest." Static for several seconds. Then Zeknor's voice again, but different now. "Confused. The human delegation is aboard. They are requesting to speak with me personally. Something about a business proposition." A pause. What harm could it do? They're just humans. That was the last transmission that Fekmori's image returned. "Your assignment is to travel to the Proxima system and determine what happened to the Crimson Talon fleet. The Hegemony High Command is concerned enough to request council assistance. Concerned enough to stop making threatening gestures toward human territories," she said, "which, frankly, is more concerning than the missing fleet." 6 hours later, I was in hyperspace, heading toward what I was increasingly certain would be another lesson in why the galaxy had been fundamentally misunderstanding humanity for decades. The Proxima system looked exactly as peaceful and boring as it had in every previous survey. 3 planets, 2 gas giants, 1 small human colony on the second world, and absolutely no sign of a 47-ship war fleet that I began scanning for debris, energy signatures, anything that might indicate what had happened to 12,000 hegemony warriors and their vessels. What I found instead was a single human ship, exactly matching the description from Zeknor's final transmission. It was holding position near the colony, broadcasting a standard peaceful intentions beacon that I established communication with the vessel. The face that appeared on my screen was middle-aged, female, with short gray hair and the kind of calm expression that I was beginning to recognize as distinctly dangerous on humans. "Observer Krix-Val," she said before I could introduce myself. "We have been expecting you. We, Human Defense Corps. I'm Director Patricia Voss. I believe you have already met one of our operatives." Marcus Kane's face appeared beside hers on the screen. He was wearing the same black uniform, but now I noticed details I'd missed before. The fabric wasn't just black. It seemed to absorb light in ways that made my optical sensors struggle to focus on him properly. "Hello again, Krix-Val," Kane said. "How's the investigation going? Where is the hegemony fleet?" "That's a very good question," Director Voss said. "Would you like to come aboard? We have some things to show you." Against every survival instinct my species had evolved over millions of years, I agreed. The human ship was surprisingly spacious inside, with corridors that seemed to extend farther than the external dimensions should have allowed. Voss led me to what appeared to be a conference room, where several other humans were waiting. "Observer Krix-Val," Voss said, "meet the negotiation team that handled the Crimson Talon situation." I looked around the table. 6 humans, all wearing variations of the same light-absorbing black uniforms. They looked like accountants. Deadly, physics-defying accountants. "Let me guess," I said. "Business proposition." "In a manner of speaking," said one of the humans, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses. "We presented Fleet Commander Zeknor with a cost-benefit analysis." "Of what?" "Of continuing to exist," he replied matter-of-factly. Another human, a woman with auburn hair, opened a folder and spread papers across the table. The hegemony fleet was planning to conquer the Proxima colony. Standard procedure: orbital bombardment, ground assault, enslavement of survivors. Very straightforward. We simply showed them the mathematics. The thin man continued. The actual cost of conquering a human settlement versus the projected benefits. I stared at the papers. They appeared to be covered in equations, charts, and diagrams that hurt to look at directly. "I don't understand. The hegemony operates on a simple principle," Director Voss explained. "Overwhelming force applied to weaker opponents. It's worked for them for centuries. But their entire strategic philosophy is based on a fundamental miscalculation, which is they assumed that the cost of conquering humanity would be limited to the immediate military engagement," Kane said. They never factored in the long-term expenses. The woman with auburn hair pointed to one of the charts. For example, the Hegemony fleet was planning to use standard orbital bombardment to soften up the colony's defenses. But they never calculated what would happen if, say, their targeting systems were to malfunction during the attack. Malfunction how? Well, she said, imagine if their weapons systems suddenly started targeting their own ships instead of the planet. That would be unfortunate. I felt my environmental suit's life support systems increase their output as my stress level spiked. Or, the thin man added, consider the logistics of maintaining a conquest fleet when your supply lines keep experiencing mysterious accidents. Ships disappearing, supply depots exploding, entire star bases suffering catastrophic system failures. We presented Commander Zeknor with projections showing that the actual cost of conquering humanity would exceed the economic output of the entire Hegemony Empire for approximately 3,000 years, Director Voss said. The mathematics were quite clear, and he believed this. We provided demonstrations, Kane said. Nothing dramatic. We simply showed him what happened when humans get creative with applied physics. The auburn-haired woman pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared above the table. It showed the Hegemony flagship, but something was wrong with the image. The ship appeared to be folded in on itself, like someone had taken a three-dimensional object and twisted it through dimensions that shouldn't exist. We introduced Commander Zeknor to the concept of non-Euclidean space folding, she explained. His ship is currently occupying the same coordinates as itself, but rotated 90 degrees through the fourth dimension. Perfectly safe, but rather inconvenient for traditional navigation. I stared at the impossible image. Where are the other 46 ships? Similar situations, the thin man said. Some are experiencing temporal displacement. Others are occupying parallel dimensional spaces. One lucky crew got to experience what it's like to exist as a two-dimensional projection for a few minutes. This is impossible, I said. That's what they said, Director Voss replied, right up until we started demonstrating basic human theoretical physics. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you stop limiting yourself to conventional three-dimensional thinking. Kane leaned forward. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it's completely reversible. No permanent damage, no loss of life. The Hegemony fleet can return to normal space-time whenever they choose. All they have to do, the auburn-haired woman added, is agree to a small policy change regarding human territories, which is, they leave us alone, Director Voss said simply, permanently. And if they refuse, then they get to explore the fascinating implications of existing in 17 dimensions simultaneously, Kane said. We have been working on that particular demonstration. Should be educational. I looked around the table at these impossibly calm humans who were casually discussing the manipulation of fundamental physics like it was a minor administrative task. How long have you been able to do this? Define able, the thin man said. We have been working on advanced theoretical physics for about 3 centuries. The practical applications are more recent. But the galaxy thinks you are primitives, I said. Your technology is considered barely adequate for interstellar travel. Marketing, Director Voss replied. It's much easier to defend yourself when your enemies don't know what you are capable of defending yourself with. Kane stood up and walked to the room's single window, looking out at the peaceful Proxima system. Every species in the galaxy makes the same mistake. They look at humans and see what they expect to see. Small, weak, technologically inferior. They never bother to look deeper. Because if they did, the auburn-haired woman said, they might notice that humans are the only species that regularly does things like accidentally discovering faster-than-light travel while trying to make better coffee, or stumbling across dimensional manipulation while attempting to solve traffic congestion problems. We don't innovate like other species, the thin man explained. We don't follow logical research progressions or build on established foundations. We make intuitive leaps that don't make sense to anyone else, including ourselves half the time. Director Voss pressed another button, and the holographic display changed to show a star map of the galaxy. Hundreds of systems were marked with small blue dots. Every one of those dots represents a human presence, she said. Not colonies or military installations. Just people. Humans who happen to be in the right place at the right time when various species need problems solved. Like Marcus here, Kane said. He's not the exception. He's the rule. I stared at the map. The blue dots were everywhere. Near every major alien homeworld, every important trade route, every strategic resource deposit. How many of you are there? Enough, Director Voss said. The galaxy has been watching humanity for 2 centuries, try to figure out our weaknesses, our capabilities, our intentions. The whole time, we have been watching back. Learning, Kane added. Understanding how each species thinks, how they fight, how they can be encouraged to make better decisions. The hegemony fleet will be returned to normal space-time in approximately 6 hours, the auburn-haired woman said. Commander Zeknor will report to his superiors that the Proxima system is defended by forces beyond their current tactical capabilities. The Hegemony High Command will classify this information and quietly redirect their expansion efforts toward less problematic targets. And the galaxy will continue to think humans are harmless, the Thin Man concluded. Because, Director Voss said, the most effective defense is the one your enemies never realize exists. As I sat in that conference room, surrounded by humans who had just casually folded an entire war fleet through dimensions I couldn't comprehend, I realized something that made my species equivalent of blood run cold. This wasn't a recent development. This wasn't humanity suddenly revealing hidden capabilities in response to galactic threats. This was how it had always been. Every peaceful human colony, every diplomatic mission, every seemingly harmless research expedition, every time in the past 2 centuries when alien forces had encountered humans and walked away thinking they were dealing with primitive, defenseless beings, it had all been carefully orchestrated. Humanity hadn't been lucky. They had been patient, and now I understood why Marcus Kane had been reading Sun Tzu. The greatest victory is the one where your enemy never realizes they have lost. The galaxy thought it was protecting humanity. Humanity had been protecting the galaxy from itself. The man in black wasn't just a soldier, he was a guardian. And there were hundreds of them, watching from the shadows, making sure that the galaxy's various species never pushed far enough to discover what humans were truly capable of when. They stopped pretending to be harmless. I left that meeting with a new understanding of humanity's place in galactic politics and a growing suspicion that my reports had been serving as intelligence briefings for the most sophisticated defensive operation in known history. The humans had been 3 steps ahead of everyone else from the very beginning, and they were just getting started.